All right, strap yourselves in, folks, because we are diving headfirst into Elon Musk's latest brainwave and his vision for America. Pulling this straight from the headlines from a CBS News article dated February 13th, hot off the press, detailing Musk's pronouncements at the World Government Summit over in Dubai. And let me tell you, he did not hold back. Talking about a complete and total reshaping of how America works. I mean, just try to imagine a world where massive parts of the U.S. government are just gone, poof, vanished. Is that exciting? Is that terrifying? I want you to think about that as we go through all of this.
It's especially interesting because, this isn't just some tech guy, some tech billionaire on the sidelines, right? This is someone who is currently deeply embedded in the Trump administration as the head of the Department of Government Efficiency, no less. And this CBS report really emphasizes how his power and influence have just continued to grow.
Yeah, and the article even points out some, potential issues with that, talking about him kind of pushing aside those longtime government officials and getting his hands on some pretty sensitive databases. There's even chatter about whether the president might be giving him a little too much authority. It's kind of a sticky situation, especially under a president like Trump.
For sure, absolutely. So when Musk goes and drops a bombshell, like calling for getting rid of entire U.S. government agencies, it's not just some abstract thought experiment. He's actually in a position where he could maybe actually pull it off.
Oh, he's not shy about shaking things up, that's for sure. He's basically saying bye-bye to bureaucracy and hello to the rule of the people. He even used this interesting analogy about weeds, saying if you want to get rid of them for good, you got to pull them up by the roots, the whole thing.
And he doesn't stop there. To drive that point home, he calls out specific agencies like USAID and the National Endowment for Democracy. He even throws out this pretty provocative question: how much democracy have they actually achieved lately? Definitely knows how to get a reaction, that's for sure.
Oh, he knows how to push some buttons, there's no doubt. So this whole speech was given over in Dubai, but it had a really strong America First kind of flavor to it, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. He is really pushing for America to take a more isolationist approach, especially when it comes to foreign policy. He's basically saying America needs to just mind its own business and stop trying to force regime change on other countries. It's a message that, probably played pretty well with the folks over there in the UAE, especially given their own, well, autocratic style of government.
Yeah, for sure. Now, the article also touches on Musk's anxieties about diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI as it's commonly known. He seems pretty concerned about it, and he even connects that to his fears about artificial intelligence, which I found really interesting.
Yeah, it's a connection worth exploring. Is Musk genuinely concerned about DEI? Or is it more about those bigger anxieties he has about AI potentially becoming too powerful? Remember, he even brought up that hypothetical scenario where, AI programmed to prioritize diversity ends up, deciding to eliminate men in positions of power, just like that. It's a pretty chilling thought, even if it's just hypothetical.
Absolutely chilling. And speaking of AI, we can't forget about Musk's own AI chatbot that's in the works, Grok 3. He says it'll be ready in just 2 weeks and even called it kind of scary, his words. Plus, he recently kind of took a swing at the management of OpenAI, another AI company he co-founded but recently tried to take over. There's a lot of drama going on in the AI world right now.
There really is. It's kind of a whirlwind. On the one hand, you have Musk warning us about the dangers of AI. But on the other hand, he's developing his own chatbot, which he himself calls scary. And then you have OpenAI, which he helped create. But they seem to be heading in a different direction now. It really makes you think, what's the future of AI going to look like, and who's going to be in control of how it develops?
And to add even to the mix, we have Musk's Dubai Loop project with the Boring Company, describing it as a wormhole for super fast transportation within the city. We don't know too many specifics yet, but knowing Musk, it's going to be ambitious, to say the least. Feels like Musk is building his own little sci-fi world over there, doesn't it? AI, underground tunnels, making big pronouncements on the world stage. It's all very captivating. But I think it's important to ask, what does it all actually mean for the average person? What are the real-world implications of this vision, this Muskian reshaping of America, if we can even call it that?
Right. That's the big question, isn't it? And I think it's important to acknowledge that not everybody is, on board with this radical restructuring. The CBS article does point out that there is some pushback, some real concerns about how much power and influence Musk is gathering.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Some people might say, a strong leader who's willing to shake things up is exactly what we need to break through all that bureaucratic gridlock. But then you have to wonder, at what cost? Is there a point where disruption becomes dangerous, where one person, even someone as brilliant as Musk, has too much control?
Those are definitely some tough questions to grapple with, and it leads to even bigger questions about transparency and accountability. When you have someone like Musk at the helm, with his personality and drive, it becomes even more crucial to make sure there are systems in place to prevent, any potential abuse of that power.
Makes you think about the role of government in the 21st century, right? I mean, is Musk right when he says we need a smaller, less involved government? Or is he underestimating the importance of the agencies and programs he wants to get rid of?
It's so complex. There are no easy answers. I mean, on one hand, it's easy to see the appeal of a more streamlined, less bureaucratic government, right? Getting things done more efficiently, cutting through all that red tape, sounds pretty good to a lot of people. But at the same time, we have to remember that those agencies that Musk sees as weeds often play vital roles, providing essential services, protecting vulnerable populations, promoting democracy and human rights, both here in the U.S. and globally.
Absolutely. And what about the impact of American isolationism on the world stage? The U.S. has been a major player in international affairs for decades, for better or for worse. If America really does start to pull back, mind its own business, like Musk is saying, what happens then? Does that create a vacuum that other, maybe less democratic powers rush to fill?
That's a huge concern, and it ties into the bigger question of global interdependence. We live in a world where economies are intertwined, climate change affects everyone, security threats transcend national borders. Can any nation, even one as powerful as the United States, really afford to go it alone these days?
It's almost like Mud is overlooking those complexities. Deleting agencies like USAID might seem like a simple cost-cutting measure, but those agencies represent America's commitment to international cooperation, to providing humanitarian aid, supporting democratic values around the world.
Exactly. And if those commitments fade away, what takes their place? Does it create more opportunities for authoritarian regimes to take hold? Does it make conflict and instability more likely? Those are pretty weighty questions, and to be honest, they worry me.
Me too. It really makes you think about historical parallels. Those empires in the past that became too focused on their own internal affairs, that turned inward, they often ended up declining in power and influence on the world stage. Is that what Musk sees for America? Or does he have some grand plan that we're just not seeing?
It's hard to say, Musk is definitely a brilliant innovator. There's no doubt about that. But sometimes his vision, it feels more like something out of a sci-fi movie than a practical plan for, actually running a complex nation. And let's be real, he hasn't always been right. He's made his fair share of mistakes, both in business and in things he said publicly.
Very true. But whether you agree with him or not, there's no denying that he's a force to be reckoned with. His ideas, his innovations, just his sheer boldness, it's shaking things up. And it's forcing us to rethink the status quo.
And that in itself can be a good thing. It sparks debate, challenges old assumptions, pushes us to step outside of our comfort zones. Even if we don't agree with everything Musk says, we can still learn from that willingness to think big, to challenge conventional wisdom, to push the limits of what's possible.
I think after all of that, the big question everyone's probably asking themselves is, could a smaller, more isolationist America really thrive? I mean, is that even possible in this day and age?
Yeah, that's really the core of it, isn't it? And honestly, the CBS article, it kind of dances around that question. It hints at those potential challenges, but it doesn't really dig into the specifics. It's almost like Musk just assumes everyone's automatically on board with the idea that a smaller government equals a more successful America.
Right. He seems to be putting a lot of faith in, American innovation, that entrepreneurial spirit, that whole a rising tide lifts all boats mentality. But is that really enough to overcome the very real and very serious challenges that we're facing on a global scale? Things like climate change, resource scarcity, geopolitical tensions, all of that.
Yeah, that's where things get really, really complicated. It seems like Musk is kind of downplaying the interconnectedness of our world. He wants to do away with these agencies, but those agencies, even with their flaws, they represent America's commitment to global cooperation. They provide humanitarian aid, they promote democracy, they work on issues that affect every nation.
And if America steps back from those roles, who fills that void? What message does that send to the rest of the world? Does it create a power vacuum that, more authoritarian regimes are all too happy to fill?
Those are the questions that keep me up at night. The potential consequences are pretty huge. More conflict, more instability, less cooperation on the really critical issues facing humanity. It's not a future I want to see.
I hear you. It's a lot to think about. This article, as fascinating as it is, it doesn't give us any easy answers. In fact, it leaves us with even more questions than we started with.
And you know what? That's the sign of a truly thought-provoking deep dive. It's not about just giving you the answers. It's about giving you the information and the different perspectives so you can come to your own conclusions.
Exactly. So to our listeners out there, we always encourage you to keep digging deeper. Don't just take our word for it. Read that full CBS article. Check out other sources. And most importantly, think critically about what you're learning.
Because in a world where people like Elon Musk are pushing for such radical changes, Your ability to think for yourself, to weigh those different viewpoints, to arrive at your own informed conclusions, that's more important now than ever.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Stay curious, stay engaged, and keep those brain cells firing. Until next time, fellow deep divers. See you on E2.